Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks to the multitudes that are here in person and the webinar folks. Welcome to our talk on the rules for Southern Straits. We're going to do it a little bit differently than you've seen it in the past. We're going to look at three different things tonight. First thing we're going to go through is some Strait-specific rules. Some of which are kind of new, so I think it's good for everybody to have a look at. Then we're going to look at the rules that are in play after dark. And the rules that are in play after dark are a little bit different than the racing rules. So we're going to try and show you what those differences are. And then the third thing we're going to go through tonight is the rules that we're going to introduce the rules that we're going to use for Straits 2023. And if I can just emphasize one thing tonight on the new rules, they do not apply this year. If you only remember one thing about that presentation, it's that they do not apply this year, they start next year. Okay, so we got a protest flag here. How many of you guys all carry protest flags? You also need to carry a second flag with you, either a yellow flag or an I flag. Does anybody know why we have those?
Because if you want to admit, so you are taking a penalty required to arrive at the finish, so that we know to talk to you about that penalty.
That's right. We are using the alternate penalty system for this race, which means you cannot exonerate yourself after committing a foul with a 720. You have to fly a yellow or an I flag, and that acknowledges your foul. And then you need to keep it flying all the way to the finish, and you need to report it to the people at the finish. So what happens? This is the alternate penalty. So if you fly that yellow flag, you're going to get a penalty which is 20% of the difference between the corrected time of the first yacht and the last yacht in your division, and that's going to be added to your elapsed time for the race. Now that's a little different than the way most regattas use the alternate penalty, because they do 20% of the number of boats in your division. So if there was 10 boats in your division, you would get a penalty of 2 places. So if you came second, then you'd be scored a 4th. Okay, but we use a time penalty. Does anybody know why? You guys are smart.
Nobody wants to get slapped.
Well, I mean, Chris Rock maybe, but it's because we do overall scores for the whole course. So there might be 3 divisions on the medium course. If you give 2 points out of the 10 boats in division 3 on the medium course, how do you score that against all the other divisions? So we use a time penalty. There's a second alternate penalty. This one you do not need to fly a yellow flag for. You just have to say after the finish, whoops, we screwed up, we're taking a penalty. Okay, the reason we have this one is because we have an arbitration system. So that if we go through so if we have a boat-on-boat incident and we send it to an arbitrator, and the arbitrator says to one boat, boy, you really ought to, you don't have a very good chance of protest. Then you have the opportunity to take the lesser penalty of 30% rather than go to a protest and get disqualified. If we didn't have this, the only thing that would happen is you would have to withdraw from the race, so you might as well go to the protest. So like most things in the rules, they're just to try and prevent the jury from having to get together after the race and hear. This is a new rule. This is actually an experimental rule from World Sailing, and I really want to commend the committee for including it. Everybody have a read of it. Basically, it means if you're in a traffic separation scheme The key one is B. A boat shall not impede or present a threat to the safe passage of a power-driven vessel. I like C though. If they do the 5 horns on you, you're toast. We're going to throw you out or penalize you. And that's actually quite different from the old rule, which you had to obey all these traffic separation rules when you're in one of those schemes. So where does that affect straits? The only traffic separation scheme we're really dealing with is in English Bay. And I put this slide on here because I think it's kind of cool because it shows the old traffic lane, and they just changed this, I don't know how many years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And I don't know how many people know this, but they actually moved QD. I've always pictured everybody in the Snowflake series going around that thing, looking at their GPS going, well, what the heck? It's not where it's supposed to be. They actually moved it. Okay, so it is further north now. So when you're in that traffic separation lane coming off the start, just stay away from any kind of commercial traffic is basically the rule now. Any questions on that? By the way, people on the webinar, feel free to ask questions over the system. All right, let's look at rules at night. Again, a lot of you guys have heard me make this a presentation very similar to this several times. So you're probably sick of hearing me talk about it. So what we're going to do this year is we're going to turn you guys into the jury, and I'm going to put some scenarios up here, and you guys are going to tell me what the decision should be. What we'll do is we'll do it with the in-house gang here, and then if anybody watching on the webinar wants to shoot us your opinion, just do it through the comments, David, or?
Yes.
Yeah, just put a comment in and we'll amalgamate it and we'll compare what the people in the room versus the people on the internet think. Yeah, use the chat function. Okay, so what are the rules at night? This is from the NOR. So between sunset and sunrise, the navigation rules for the International Regulations for Prevention of Collisions at Sea, IRPCAS, the lovely sounding acronym, shall replace the Racing Rules Part 2. Note, it only replaces Part 2, which is the boat on boat stuff. Everything else is the same. So don't think because it's replacing the racing rules, it means you can turn your engine on in light air. It's just Part 2. So sunset is defined as 5 after 8 on Friday night, and it goes until 6:18 in the morning. No ambiguity there. I can't stress this enough. IRPCAS is not designed to regulate the normal kind of racing situations we're all familiar with. It's designed to prevent collisions. Okay, everybody listening to this, well, let me ask this. How many of you guys have your boater card? Your boater card, your safe boater card, you all have it, right? So you took a test in IRPCAS because that's part of the boater safety card test. So everybody ought to know all these rules. Okay, we've got a couple of boats here reaching along. It's 11:30 at night. Got a very smart group here. Tell me, who has the right of way? Green? Who thinks green has the right of way? Who thinks red has the right of way? Okay, there's a trick question. There's no such thing as right of way under IRPCAS. What we have is the stand-on vessel. Red is the stand-on vessel.
I have a question here. If it's a full moon, like it has been quite a number of straits, and you can clearly see, even though it's midnight or 3 a.m., and you can clearly see the boats in your right side. If you can clearly see, say, 3 a.m. with clear skies and full moon, does this apply? Just because of the time of day?
Yes. Okay.
Well, that answers my question.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
It's absolutely definitive. It's in the NOR between 8:05 and 6:18 in the morning. We're sailing under ERPCAS.
So even if it's like dark and stormy throughout the day, completely darker than it is in the middle of the night with a full moon, which always is in Straits. This applies more than it does in the daytime.
It completely applies between those two times. Like there's no ambiguity to it.
So you're saying at nighttime?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. So we have red as this. So what does that make green? Oh, sorry. Let me go back. What does the stand-on vessel mean? The stand-on vessel shall maintain her course and speed, but she may take action to avoid collision if it becomes clear that the giveaway vessel is not taking appropriate action. So you guys have done a lot of Straits races. Maintaining her course is probably fairly easy. Not so sure about speed. What does that make green? Green is the giveaway vessel. So what does that mean for green? The giveaway vessel must take early and substantial action to keep well clear. Okay, those are essentially the ERPCAS rules. You're either the giveaway vessel or the stand-on vessel in any boat-on-boat situation. Now, what creates what we probably persist in thinking was right away, in other words, the stand-on vessel, that's very similar to the racing rules. Leeward is the stand-on vessel versus windward. Starboard is the stand-on vessel versus port. Okay. So now let's look at some scenarios. And you guys are going to tell me what the decision should be. So again, exact same one we just talked about. We've got red to leeward, green to weather, red is stand-on, green is giveaway. Here's your facts found. Green, broad reaching on port tack was overlapped to red. Also broad reaching on port tack on a line 1 boat length to weather of red's line. So green is of 1 boat length between the 2 boats. Red altered course to windward by approximately 15 degrees. In response, green altered course to weather by approximately 15 degrees. There's no contact between the boats. Okay? So you guys are the jury. Here's the diagram of what happened. So you can give 4 possible decisions. First, penalize green. Second, penalize red. Third, penalize both of them. Or 4, penalize neither of them. So you guys tell me, who thinks penalize green? Who thinks penalize red? Okay, you got 3. How many think penalize both of them? No? How about penalize neither of them? Okay, so we're fairly evenly split between penalize red and penalize neither. Peter, why did you pick penalize red?
It's the altered course, the stand-on vessel and altered course.
Okay. That's a good argument. Okay, sorry. For those of you at home, Peter said because red is by definition the stand-on vessel, and the stand-on vessel has to maintain course and speed. And under this scenario, red altered course. Stuart, you said penalize nobody. Why? They're miles apart. They're a boat length apart. Okay. So we have very smart people around here, and we've got two different answers. Okay, it's not as cut and dry. Personally, I would say red should get penalized because they altered course. That's black and white. You either alter course or you don't alter course. I think being a boat length away from each other is pretty darn close. Especially at night, that's gonna feel like you're right on top of each other. But you could make that argument that well, actually, no, you can't make that argument because it's unambiguous about red. You could make sorry.
There could be an obstruction you don't know about.
Where does it say that in URCAS?
At the bottom of the slide.
The yacht club logo. There's nothing in URCAS about obstructions. This is about.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What if you're rounding entrance?
Oh, we'll get to that.
Okay.
Okay. Great question. Can we just park that? Okay. Let's look at another scenario. So green, broad reaching on port tack, was overtaking red, also broad reaching on port tack, on a line 1 boat length to weather red's line. When green was 2 boat lengths behind red, so they're not overlapped, red altered course to windward by approximately 15 degrees. In response, green altered course by 15 degrees, and there's no contact between the boats. Let's have a look at that one. So green's following red, red alters course, green alters course. No collision. Further apart this time. How many say penalize green? How many say penalize red? 4 there. How many say penalize them both? How many say penalize nobody? Okay. Daryl, you said penalize nobody. Why?
Because there's far enough apart that green has many options where they could go. They could take their stern. It wasn't on a collision course.
Okay.
I didn't perceive that from this diagram.
Okay. Peter, why did you pick red?
Same as the first one.
Because
It's no different.
red is the stand-on vessel. So who is the stand-on vessel in this? Peter's correct. It's red. So who's the giveaway vessel? Green. What does the stand-on vessel have to do? Maintain their course. So Daryl, there is nothing in URCAS that says as long as there's lots of room, you can do it. These guys are still pretty close, I would argue. 2 boat lengths is not a long distance away, particularly if it's windy. As soon as red, in my opinion, but notice we had different opinions, right? And this is not complicated rule stuff. There's a lot more ambiguity about URCAS.
So Rich, how close do they have to be before the rules? When is too close? What are these rules?
I don't know.
What if they're a mile apart?
I don't know. Is the short answer. There is nothing in URCAS. So sorry, for those of you at home, Peter's question was, when does this all kick in? How close do you have to be? If they're a mile apart? The answer is there's nothing in the rules that tell you that. So that's where a lot of this ambiguity comes in.
So we run into this all the time from entrance to outlet. Because you got fast and slow boats. Some put up spinnakers, some don't. It's a huge reality. That's where you're doing this.
Yeah. Again, remember when I started out at the very first slide on this was these rules are not designed to mediate racing boat-on-boat situations. These are designed to avoid collisions. Imagine these were freighters. And a freighter, 2 boat lengths, you know, how long's a freighter? It's pretty long. But imagine a freighter 2 boat lengths in front of another one did a left turn right in front of the path of the other freighter.
Or if they were too far, 30s, 20, 12 knots.
And then the other thing is, we're not talking about it all, and I purposely didn't put it in the scenarios was, what happens when it's windy? Does that mean closer, you know, the further apart you are? Anyway, sorry, let's look at the next one. So number 3 is exactly the same as the one we just did. I didn't do a diagram, it's hard to do. But now let's say green is 10 boat lengths behind. So say these are 35-foot boats and green is 350 feet behind red. Same thing. You guys are the jury. Penalize green. Who thinks we should penalize green? Wait, green's getting a pass. Who thinks we should penalize red? Nobody thinks we should penalize red. Who thinks we should penalize both of them? Nobody. Who thinks we should penalize nobody? That's all that's left. So, okay. So to you at home, everyone has chosen penalize nobody. Ian, why did you choose penalize nobody?
I'm thinking it was a wind shift and there's plenty of room. The risk of a collision as well.
Okay. Those are all reasonable points of view. The problem is I can't give you a definitive answer because to the question Peter had before is how close is too close? It is not defined. You are going to be at the mercy of a jury. And imagine we're all hearing these things as a jury. We don't know. We can't go and have a definitive answer. So the rule for that is that if you end up in front of a jury, you're taking your chances because they could do anything and justify it. Let's do another one here. Very similar situation. Only this time, green, broad reaching on foretap, is on a line half a boat length the weather of red's line. When green is 1 boat length behind red, red alters course to windward. In response, green alters course and there's no contact between boats. So that looks, they're all a little bit closer. Who says penalize green? Who says penalize red? Who says penalize both of them? No. Who says penalize nobody? So Jen is shaky on penalize both. Why?
Well, green was overtaking.
Green's overtaking.
They're supposed to be
They're the keep clear boat. So again, red is the stand-on vessel. Green is the keep clear vessel. What's the responsibility of the keep clear vessel?
to stay clear.
To stay well clear. Is of course half a boat length the weather of red keeping well clear? Frankly, I would argue no, but there's no definition. The rule doesn't say stay more than 1 boat length away. And again, I go back to what are the conditions? In 3 knots of wind, yeah, maybe it's borderline. In 25 knots of wind, that's suicidal. See, it's not cut and dry. Okay, here's another interesting change for ERCAS. So it's 2:30 in the afternoon. We're sailing under the racing rules now. Which boat has right of way? Who says red? Who says green? Who's a coward won't commit to it? Pretty straightforward. You get 2 boats running. We had people mostly say green, then a bunch of people not say anything. This one I can be definitive about. Red has the right of way. They're on starboard. Classic Rule 10, port starboard. What happens at 11:30 at night? So remember, we don't have a right-of-way vessel, but we do have a stand-on vessel. Who's the stand-on vessel?
Green.
Why?
They're ahead.
They're ahead. Under ERPCAS, this is a significant difference from the racing rules. The overtaking boat, no matter what tack they're on, is the giveaway vessel. So the green would be the stand-on vessel. Sorry, I'm sort of flipping that. Interestingly enough, even sail and power mean nothing under this rule, under ERPCAS. If green was a power boat and red is going faster, so if the guys on longboard are screaming up on, it's a breeze and going 15 knots of downwind, and there's some powerboat chugging along at 8 knots, the giveaway vessel is the vessel behind. Now, I've drawn these lines on because ERPCAS defines an overtaking boat in kind of a weird way. Basically, it says if you can see the stern light and only the stern light, you are an overtaking vessel. I've drawn it this way because a lot of the boats we sail have their running lights up on the bow. So as long as you're in that sort of, it's not quite a cone because it's cut off at the stern, you're the overtaking vessel. So you could be under what the racing rules would consider you clear behind, but if you were off to the side, you would actually be a weather or a lured boat, as long as you could see the running light, the red or the green running light. Okay, so that's a big difference. If you're on starboard, okay, you are not necessarily the giveaway vessel, or sorry, the stand-on. Now let's talk about islands. Okay, so let's say we're going around an island. Let's say this is at 2:30 in the afternoon. Say it's an island like Sisters Island. In the southeasterly, we're running around there. Green heads up to go around the island, and red has to bear away to avoid them. You guys are the jury. Who do we penalize under this circumstance? Who says penalize green? It's 2:30 in the afternoon now. This is racing rules, not ERPCAS. Who says penalize green? Who says penalize red? Who says penalize both of them? Who says penalize neither? Yeah, that's right. Because green would have entered the zone before red. So green is entitled to room to round the mark, which means they're allowed to head up and go around the island. And red has to avoid them, which they did. So no contact, no foul, no problem.
On an island, first of all, on the mark, it's obviously the zone of the defined area and stuff like that. But it's a small pinpoint. When you're doing an island that might have out stopping reefs and everything else, what is the zone? How is that defined?
I would think you would define it. So the question was if you have a sort of messy island that you're using as a mark. So all the mark room things are kicking in, and it's got little rock outcrops and shallow spots and all that kind of stuff. I don't know that that's defined in any cases, Ian. I don't know if you've ever seen that defined anywhere. I would certainly consider it as any sort of point of the island that the two boats are closest to. So whatever that first little outcrop is. I would think a rock that's not really part of the island is an obstruction.
I'd say if an inside overlap was formed going towards the island at a reasonable point, you could pretty well guarantee that that boat would expect to carry you inside.
Yeah. Again, it's a 3 boat length circle. It's just a weird looking circle because it's actually not around a point. It's around some sort of oblong shape. Yeah, that's a great description, halo. So let's look at another scenario here. So this is what we just looked at. Green's broad reaching on port tack. Red's broad reaching on port tack. 2 boat lengths behind green. Red was not overtaking green, so it's not like green definitely would have got to the zone, assuming we're using zones. Okay, so now let's say we did that at 11:30 at night. First of all, who's the stand-on vessel? Green. So red is the get away with it. Okay? So this happens. How many say penalize red? How many say penalize green? How many say penalize both of them? Who says penalize nobody? Okay. Peter, if you voted for penalize nobody, tell me why.
Well, I guess I would just say that the proper course around that, I realize it's not defined, but a proper course around the mark is what green is sailing. There was no, in this diagram, there's no risk of a collision necessarily. Just do both lanes behind. He's sailing the proper course. You can't just kind of keep sailing forever, just straight along. So, to me, a reasonable course around that mark would have been the course is taking.
Daryl, I think you said, but I think you said penalize green, did you not?
I did.
Tell me why penalize green.
I don't believe that the regulations said that you have the right to sail any particular course. It's the fact that you're a stand-on vessel. Your obligation is to maintain your course.
So basically, we have an opinion that green is just sailing the course. He should be allowed to do that. Therefore, red should avoid it. We have the opinion that there is nothing in ERCAS that says you get to change your course to stay on the race course. Therefore, he's the stand-on vessel. He should keep going. Okay, I've had this debate with other judges in Vancouver. I'm on Daryl's side. I think green is the stand-on vessel, and he's not allowed to change course. So what does he have to do, Peter? In my opinion, he has to keep going until red changes course and is sailing away from it, so that the bearing would be changing, or however you would define that. Okay, but I've had this discussion with other judges who think the other thing. Now, so in doing that, whenever I get a rule conundrum, if you will, I go to the guru, which is Dick Rose. And Dick Rose wrote an article about this, and Dick Rose agrees that green is not allowed to change course.
I would like to say that I think it's contextual, like it totally depends on the situation. Both parties could be at fault, depending on the situation.
So tell me why you think it's contextual. What is it in ERCAS that makes you think?
It totally matters whether, the red vote is coming down because they think there's a grief, and the green vote somehow believe they have the right to go up, and then there's a collision. There's a whole another way to say that the green vote just says, you know what, I'm gonna go up and I'm gonna push you up no matter what, even though the red vote knows they're kind of pushing that guy down. So
I have to say, as a judge, I wouldn't agree with the ability to just push it up because you kind of want to. You either have the right to do it or you don't. I further checked this scenario with the head of the Sail Canada Appeals Committee, and he also agreed that green, under the rules, has to keep their course. They're not allowed to head up to go around the island. So if you believe that, if you're red and you think that green fouled you and you protest, and our protest committee says, no, green's okay, man, I'd appeal it, because the appeals committee has a different opinion. But it's not as black and white as we all would like it to be. I've actually had this happening as we're going around Sisters about 2:30 in the morning. I was on a J109 and a 1D35, who shall remain nameless, cut up in front of us, and we bore off behind them. And I'm so conditioned by the racing rules that I didn't think anything of it. I just went, oh, they're going up, I have to go behind. Never occurred to me he was following us. But he did, at least in my opinion, and in the opinion of some other judges, but not every judge. Okay, look at the ambiguity here.
Yeah, just I mean, there's some context to it, in that everybody knows that we're going around the island. And even commercial vessels alter course to get to their destination at some point. And I think if in commercial situations, I imagine they're on the radio talking to each other to make things clear. Are we allowed to do the same thing here?
So there's nothing in URCAS that says if you're changing course to follow something, you're allowed to do that. So there are some judges that agree with you, but there are frankly some significant judges that disagree with you.
Even if you had a line of communication with the following vessel saying, this is my intention, in 3 minutes or whatever, I'm going to tack over or drive over, whatever, and head on this course.
Yeah, there's nothing that says as the stand-on vessel, you're allowed to communicate to the giveaway vessel and then change course. There's nothing in URCAS that says you can do that.
Nothing that says I can't do that either.
Well, URCAS says you can't change course.
All right.
So if you're behind it, be on the inside
Yeah.
line, rather tight.
Okay, so I'm gonna address that right now. The purpose of URCAS is to prevent collisions, not to regulate racing situations. Do not be aggressive. Okay? This is, I think, the trap we fall. Oh, sorry, we got a question from our online.
Rich, can you go back to that slide again? So if it's not to prevent collisions, now the red boat looks like it's on a collision course with the island on the straight line that it was going in. How would the red boat be considered at fault?
Well, this is a great question. What is the responsibility of the red boat? It's the keep clear boat. What's its responsibility? Does anybody remember? The words are keep well clear. So you could make an argument, and I'd be willing to listen to that argument, that red is not keeping well clear, though they're several boat lengths away. But you can make an argument, again, might depend on the conditions. In 5 knots of breeze, that's probably keeping well clear. In 25 knots of breeze, I would argue that being a couple of boat lengths from another boat going around Sisters Island, and Peter's nodding because he's done that. He's probably done it in like 40 knots away.
Pretty dangerous.
Yeah, that's not keeping, being 2 boat lengths away from another boat in 30 knots of breeze, that's way too close. So in that case, what would we do with this scenario? I frankly penalize both. You're just disgusted with the whole idea. That just doesn't seem right. See, I think we're so conditioned to the racing rules that this just seems sacrilegious to us, that the boat wouldn't be able to go where it wanted. That's what I think. But again, I'll come back to these things are made to keep collisions. Don't be aggressive. So we're kind of going, hey, I could get an advantage. I'll be inside. That guy will have to keep going and I'll be able to fit inside him. Don't do that. Stay away from other boats.
Well, at some point, you're giving up advantage.
Absolutely. And let's go back to probably the biggest place that the difference between URCAS and the racing rules comes into effect. And that's the very first scenario we were looking at. 2 boats are overlapped going downwind, in a broad reach. The biggest, if you take nothing away from this talk, if you are the lured boat, you cannot luff. Okay, you are the stand-on vessel, you are not allowed to luff. And that is by far the most common situation that these things, that the URCAS versus racing rules occur, is that prohibition on luffing. So if you remember nothing else from this, remember that. So talk a little bit about getting good at this stuff. One of the things we do on our boat is we're sailing at night. Okay, we've been sailing all day. Let's face it, the guys on the rail are a little bit bored. we talk through it. If we see another boat out there, we say, okay, let's say we start to come together. Who's the stand-on vessel? Who's the, talk it through, because this stuff is not instinctual to us. I would argue that the racing rules, to anybody that's raced as long as a lot of you guys have, are instinctual. Any more questions about ERCAS? Anything from online? Beautiful young assistant over there.
There is one question, I'm not quite sure. It says if 100 boat lined up close to each other, then all boat except for the last boat have to stay in straight course.
Yes, theoretically. Yeah. That never happens though, really. I mean, the other thing about ERCAS and sailing at night is by the time we get to darkness, typically on the Straits race, the boats are pretty spread out. You're not usually around other boats at night, that close. So it, has happened, definitely. We had a very very strange situation, a little bit like the question from the cloud. It was a race that the medium course went from Bolinas to Halibut Bank and then to Entrance Island. And there was no wind in the middle of the strait, and a loser's breeze came up and blew the whole fleet together as we went into this. And we all went around Halibut Bank in clumps of 5 and 6 boats. And I'll guarantee you, everybody just used the racing rules.
Visibility was pretty good.
Yep. Yeah, the full moon and everything, but that was wrong. That's not how it should have been done. But again, the purpose of this is to avoid collisions. So Peter said at the very beginning, he basically said, look, we just kind of try to stay away from everybody. That's, in my opinion, that's the right call. Because stuff can happen quickly at night. Okay, let's look at the future of night racing rules. Again, this is not this year. This is in 2023. But it's kind of interesting to have been talking about ERCAS, and we can look at these and you can see what the world sailing people were thinking of. So this is Appendix RV, which stands for Reduced Visibility Racing Rules. This is another test rule, which can be invoked. So let's look at some of these things. So they change for reduced visibility rules. They change the definition of keep clear. Okay, a boat keeps clear of a right-of-way boat if the right-of-way boat can sail her course with no need to take avoiding action and with no less than 40 meters between the boats. 40 meters. So how far is 40 meters? This isn't going to be any good for anybody at home, but so from here to that wall is 27 meters. So 40 meters is this length plus 50%, 1.5 times this distance. That's 40 meters. So if you get within 40 meters of another boat, you are not keeping clear.
Are you saying that this is relevant to the 2022 straight race?
No, thank you for asking the question. This is starting in 2023. So all the stuff, so in 2 weeks, you're going to be sailing under ERCAS and all the ambiguity that ERCAS brings. In 2023, we're going to be using these rules. So that's a, sorry.
ERCAS still applies to non-racing boats.
Oh, yes, like it always does. Okay, so whenever, if we're racing around English Bay and a guy trolling comes out in his powerboat, ERCAS applies. Yeah, have you ever run into a trolling guy that thinks because he's got a line out, he has right away because it's a fishing boat? That's fun. So again, we'll look at our little diagram from before. You have to stay 40 meters away. Now, clearly this diagram is not terribly to scale because these boats are not 40 meters long. These are Russian oligarch racing or something. Okay, they added another definition. A boat is overtaking when she's approaching a boat from clear astern. She remains the overtaking boat until she is clear ahead. The other boat is the boat being overtaken. So in this diagram, green is the overtaking boat. Let's say it's Peter's boat going past our boat, so he's going a hell of a lot faster. It's going past us. It's still overlapped. So green is still the overtaking boat. He's overtaking boat until they're clear ahead. Okay, a boat is overtaken. So I just read through that. Okay, another. So here's a change to a rule. We were talking definitions before. So a leeward boat shall not sail above her proper course while she is within 80 meters of the windward boat. So remember how long 40 meters looked like? Well, this is twice as far. So if you're within 80 meters of another boat, it's not that you can't alter course. You can't, doesn't say you can't luff, just says you can't go above your proper course.
Is this for like foiling America's Cup boats in dark or what?
These are the reduced visibility rules. 17.2, when boats on the same tack are within 80 meters of each other, a boat being overtaken shall sail her proper course until the overtaking boat becomes overlapped. Okay, so what they're trying to capture here is that whole don't luff feature from ERPCAS. But you notice the nice thing about it is it's a lot more defined. We now have distances. Remember, we were all kind of going, gee, if they're 10 boat lengths apart, maybe that guy can luff. Well, now it's defined. It's 80 meters. If you're 100 meters away, you can sail to the moon.
Well, the concern I have, this is reduced visibility.
Yes.
How do you judge 80 meters in reduced visibility?
Yes.
It's a good question. I don't have an answer for it. You hope the moon's out. I don't know. I think what it is you have to, well, so here's a good look at 17.3 then. If there is reasonable doubt that a boat is overtaking another boat, it shall be presumed that she is. So if you're not sure whether it's 100 meters away or 70 meters away, you have to assume that it's within that and you can't luff above proper course. Okay, I like this because it's adding a lot more definition to it. You know, if we're the race committee, once we find the facts, or sorry, the protest committee, once we find the facts, we can make a decision a lot easier than we could under ERPCAS.
I like how it's added proper course.
Yes, because we all know what that means. It's not keep the same course and speed.
So just when you think about 80 meters, the 40-foot boat, the big end, that's 7 boat lengths.
Yeah. So if somebody's within 7 boat lengths of you, and you are either being overtaken or you are the lured boat, you can't sail above your proper course. Okay, because what they're trying to avoid is people luffing each other at night because it's dangerous, because if you're the windward boat, you might not see in time that boat luffing up in front of you. They're trying to avoid that.
And if you're on Dusty Marsh, it's like 20 boat lengths away.
No, but are you saying you're having trouble like visualizing 80 meters?
No, I don't know.
It is,
You know, it's a football field.
no, it's
The link, please, or the people that are connected online, they can't hear. Okay, so thanks.
Again, what I like about it, and again, you can tell this is not to scale. I like the lack of ambiguity. Now, there are issues about how do you tell 80 meters, like in a really dark night, that might be tough to do it. Frankly, my recommendation then would be you're conservative again.
Use your rangefinder.
Yeah,
That's right.
It's okay, reduced visibility. We're not just talking night, we're talking heavy rain, we're talking.
No. It's going to be exactly the same as ERPCAS. The NOR will say we use Appendix RV between, in this case, 8 o'clock at night and 6 in the morning.
And we know what never rains at that.
Those are the those will be, it'll be black and white.
I understand the definitions, I'm just having problems how it works in the real world.
Well, I think it's quite simple. If it's after the time on the NOR, then the RV rules apply. Like, can you imagine if we said, okay, well, if your visibility isn't too good, you should use the RV rules? Like, that would be chaos, because some boats would be using the RV rules and some boats would be using the other one. So let's look at marks. Go back to our island. So this is a cleanup one. If you give somebody mark room, you have to give them room. And the definition of room now is 40 meters between the boats. You're not allowed to get more, closer. Same thing under this one, room. It's basically adding the 40 meters. So if you're going to give somebody room, you got to allow them 40 meters. The zone, remember we talked about where's the zone? I like this because it's defined by a distance now. And it's defined by a super long distance. So it's kind of, if you're anywhere near the island, presume you're in the zone. 200 meters.
You can draw that.
You can see it.
Yeah, you could draw that in your chart plot. It's not a bad idea. So let's look at our island rounding again under these rules. Remember how it was ambiguous? Judges had different opinions of what to do under ERPCAS. Let's look at what happens now under these new rules. So let's presume green enters the zone first, same as before. All that happens now is green now has the right of way that you're used to them having.
Why wouldn't green have? Right away?
Well, we discussed that a lot under the ERPCAS, so
I know, I get it.
so I'm not going to go back over ERPCAS.
No, there's no line anymore. Now green is definitely.
Yeah, so green has the right to go wherever they want. They're allowed mark room. And red, what's their obligation is to keep clear, because they don't have mark room. Green has mark room, so red has to stay 40 meters away. Okay, it's unambiguous. You're going around that. I think this is safer. I think this is better because it feeds into the instincts that we have from the racing rules. If you take anything away from this section on the new RV appendix rules, remember this: they don't apply to this year's race. Okay, so with that, are there any questions about any of this stuff? We could go back to ERPCAS if anyone wants to talk about that. Want to talk about separation zones, traffic lanes? Everybody looks puzzled.
So if they have to keep back 40 meters, so that means it's like a parade. Everyone has to.
Yeah.
So we don't have it as much here, maybe a couple of divisions, but for instance, in Seattle, they have way bigger fleets. And they're always bunch up at the marks because of the topic.
Everybody has to keep clear, which includes a separation of 40 meters. So in this case, what would the red guy have to have done long before he gets in this situation? He'd have had to bear off, essentially. And if you have a stack of boats, yeah, you wouldn't want to be the last guy in the chain, because now it's 40 meters for every one.
I'm thinking of the old Great Equalizer in Seattle. We start on Friday night at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
That would be suicide.
But is it better under ERPCAS?
No.
Right, under ERPCAS, basically the guy in front can't change course. The guy behind him, if there's a guy behind him, can't change course. Remember, all these things are two boat interactions. So essentially what could happen if you had a whole fleet of boats go to a lured mark under ERPCAS is everybody just has to keep going on a broad reach, and the guy in the back just heads up and is now winning the race. I think this is a better system, even though it is going to create bigger things. But here's the other beauty is, if you're all trying to keep 40 meters apart, and let's say you only keep 35, you're still not hitting anything. Which again, is really the primary goal of all these rules.
No, you can't do 35, you have to do 40.
Yeah, you could be, well, let's put it this way, you could be protesting. So just thinking of that 40-meter spacing, imagine ducking a guy on, you're on port, there's a starboard boat coming. You got to duck them by 40 meters.
How much is a laser range by the cost?
Might be worth it.
I gotta say, put your hands up, you're gonna duck somebody by 40 meters. Ridiculous. Nobody's gonna do that.
So Rich, just out of curiosity, under the current rules, do you see a lot of protests?
No.
Under ERPAX?
The short answer is no. I think for two reasons. One, I think by the time we usually get to darkness, the boats are spread out enough that it's really unusual for them to be anywhere. And the second is, I think people are unsure of ERPAX, so they don't protest under it. And third is, again, I think everybody's racing rules instincts kick in, and that's how they regulate themselves. For sure, that happened to me going around Sisters. When that boat cut up in front of us, I just went behind them. And it didn't even occur to me that they had fouled us. Didn't even occur to me. Now, they got their just desserts because there was a FAR 30 underneath them who luffed them to the moon 10 boat lengths past the mark, and we passed both of them. And that was probably another reason we didn't protest, but we typically don't get protests. Again, the place I've seen, at least my personal sailing at night, where I get frustrated with other boats is when they luff you when you're going to other boats. And we say bad things to them and say you're not allowed to luff, and smart people stop luffing, and people that aren't aware of the rules go, huh, what are you talking about?
I guess my follow-up question would be, under the new rules, and given 40 meters is a lot, do you expect to get a lot more protests under the new rules next year?
Frankly, I doubt it, because I think if everybody sticks, again, if it's 35 meters or even 30 meters, I don't think somebody's going to protest you for that. They could, but I don't see it. I don't, personally, as a judge, I don't see a lot of boats trying to use the rules to gun down other boats. You know, you get into situations which are dangerous, and then people will protest, and of course, God forbid, there's collisions, and then everybody gets really serious then because they're worried about the shark.
So an interesting thing at 40 meters, you can't identify them.
Yeah, it might be tough. Yeah. And a big spotlight, so you know who they are. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I personally don't think there'll be a lot of. Now, if people don't read these rules and they start getting within a boat length of other boats, you know, people might start throwing protests.
But if say you're going around a mark, you're like, oh, that person give me 40 meters around the mark, you can protest them?
I probably wouldn't.
You probably wouldn't, but like
Some people, I mean, the rule.
I'm not gonna go all the way around what we call before the halo. I'm not gonna go 40 meters past the halo that they have around the island, just so that I go with that rule. I'm gonna be a sailor, I'm gonna be a racer, I'm gonna race next to them, and I'm gonna use my conscience to know the fact that I'm not gonna hit them. I'm gonna avoid at every cost. I will sink my own boat before I sink theirs. That's what racing is about.
Yeah.
Like what you're saying is we gotta leave 40. So if you have 10 boats going into a mark, you got 40 meters, 40 meters, 40 meters. Everybody going out, huge halo.
Yeah, it could be a big wheel. Yeah.
So you're saying
That's what the rule's gonna say.
ridiculous.
I'm not sure we should only obey the rules we kind of like and disobey the ones we don't like, because I think I would just say you're leaving yourself vulnerable to protests. you can do what you like on
That's
the line.
fine, but
And you would, and if the other boat could prove it, I think you'd be in trouble in the protest.
what if there's like 30 other boats?
Yeah, there's rule 2 and all those things. And because if you get an advantage by breaking a rule, you would get disqualified.
Well, you know what? I really enjoy this because now I know if somebody fouls me going around, say, Sisters, I can, at the end of the race, foul them and say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna take you to the room.
Yeah, that's a pretty full-on way of sailing. What boat are you on? I'd be interested in knowing that, frankly.
I'm just saying, it's like,
Yeah, that's not really the way the rules work. It's not match racing where you can scrub a penalty. You know, we presume everybody is going to follow the rules. Now, is it in the interest of the boat that gets fouled to protest? I'm going to argue if the difference is between 40 meters and 30 meters, and it doesn't really affect the race of the other boat, I doubt they're going to go through the pain of filing a protest.
exactly. Yeah.
But again, the lesson from all these things is at night, leave more room than you're used to. Okay, but again, this doesn't apply this year. Please, everybody take that away. Any questions online?
No.
No? Either they're all logged off or.
They're listening.
Well, that's really all I've got, unless anybody's got any other questions about any of the other rules or rules in general, or anything for the committee. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Oh, I've been asked to remind everybody that Straits is a complex and expensive race to put on, and would be impossible without all our wonderful sponsors. There are too many to name. I would encourage you to go to the website and look at them. But we would like to acknowledge our title sponsor, which is Navis Insurance. So thank you very much to Navis for